Do you ever wonder why you keep attracting the same type of wrong men? Emotionally unavailable, narcissistic, or just plain toxic? What if the real reason isn't bad luck, but something hidden deep within your own psyche? Carl Jung called it the shadow, the unconscious part of us that holds everything we deny, suppress, or refuse to see in ourselves. And until we face it, we're doomed to repeat the same painful relationship patterns. We've all been there, drawn to someone who feels familiar, only to realize too late that they're just another version of the same heartbreak. But what if the common denominator isn't them, but you? Not in a blaming way, but in a way that actually gives you power. According to Carl Jung, the shadow is the part of us we disown, our repressed fears, insecurities, and even strengths, and it silently shapes who we attract. If you've ever felt stuck in a cycle of disappointing relationships, the key to breaking free might not be changing who you date, but uncovering what in you keeps calling them in. The concept of the shadow, as defined by Carl Jung, is one of the most profound yet misunderstood aspects of psychology. It refers to the hidden part of our psyche, the reservoir of everything we refuse to acknowledge about ourselves. These are the emotions we suppress, the traits we deny, and the desires we deem unacceptable. They don't disappear. Instead, they sink into the unconscious, where they continue to influence our thoughts, behaviors, and relationships in ways we don't even realize. The shadow isn't inherently negative. It simply holds what we have exiled from our conscious identity, whether out of shame, fear, or societal pressure. And because it remains unseen, it exerts a silent but powerful control over our lives. The formation of the shadow begins early, shaped by childhood experiences, cultural conditioning, and personal trauma. As children, we quickly learn which parts of ourselves are praised and which are punished. Maybe you were told that anger was unacceptable, so you buried it. Perhaps vulnerability was seen as weakness, so you armored yourself with independence. Society, too, plays a role, pressuring us to conform to ideals of femininity, masculinity, success, or morality. Every time we reject an aspect of ourselves to fit in or avoid pain, it doesn't vanish. Instead, it becomes part of the shadow, lurking beneath the surface. Over time, these disowned pieces accumulate, creating an inner world of unresolved tension that seeks expression, often in ways we don't expect. Jung famously said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." This is the crux of shadow work. When we ignore these buried parts, they don't stay dormant. They emerge in our relationships, our reactions, and the patterns we can't seem to break. Have you ever been irrationally triggered by someone's behavior? That's often the shadow at work, projecting our own unacknowledged traits onto others. Or have you noticed how certain toxic dynamics feel weirdly familiar? That's the shadow recreating old wounds, trying to bring them to light so they can finally be healed. The men you attract aren't random, they're mirrors, reflecting back the very things you haven't yet faced within yourself. The shadow isn't something to fear or eliminate, it's a doorway to wholeness. By bringing these hidden aspects into awareness, we reclaim the energy we've spent suppressing them. Anger, when integrated, becomes healthy boundaries. Repressed vulnerability transforms into authentic connection. Even traits we've labeled as negative often hold wisdom. Our jealousy might point to unfulfilled desires, our neediness to neglected self-care. The goal isn't to rid ourselves of the shadow, but to understand it, befriend it, and integrate it. Because when we do, we stop being controlled by the unseen. We stop attracting partners who embody our unresolved pain. And most importantly, we step out of the cycle of fate and into the power of conscious choice. The men we attract are never accidental. They are living reflections of our deepest, most unexamined selves. This is the uncomfortable truth about projection. One of the most powerful ways our shadow shapes our relationships. When we disown certain traits within ourselves, whether it's anger, neediness, or vulnerability, we unconsciously seek them out in others. It's as if the psyche is desperate to bring these exiled parts into the light, and it does so by drawing in partners who embody them. A woman who was shamed for expressing anger as a child, for example, might suppress her own rage only to find herself repeatedly entangled with volatile, explosive men. On the surface, she sees them as the problem, but beneath that judgment lies an unspoken recognition, a distorted reflection of the fury she refuses to acknowledge in herself. This is projection at work, the shadow's way of showing us what we've been too afraid to face. But projection is only part of the puzzle. Even more insidious is the phenomenon of repetition compulsion, the unconscious drive to recreate the dynamics of our earliest wounds in an attempt to resolve them. If your father was emotionally distant, you might find yourself drawn to partners who are similarly unavailable, not because you enjoy the pain, but because your psyche is trying to rewrite the past. There's a perverse comfort in the familiar, even when it hurts. The child within you still believes that if you can just make this distant man love you, you'll finally heal that old abandonment wound. Of course, it never works. Instead, you find yourself trapped in a cycle of chasing, pleading, and feeling unseen, reliving the same heartbreak over and over, not realizing that the real work isn't about changing them, but about healing the part of you that equates love with longing. Beneath these patterns lies an even more painful truth: self-sabotage. When our shadow harbors deep-seated beliefs of unworthiness or fear of true intimacy, we will unknowingly choose partners who confirm those beliefs. A woman who secretly feels she doesn't deserve love might consistently pick men who are critical or withholding, not because she enjoys suffering, but because their treatment aligns with her unconscious self-image. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy, the shadow ensuring that the outer world matches the inner one. Even when healthier partners appear, they often feel boring or too good to be true, because the nervous system has been wired to associate love with chaos or pain. The tragedy is that this isn't a conscious choice. It's the shadow operating on autopilot, steering you toward what feels familiar, even when it's harmful. Consider the example of a woman who prides herself on her independence, who never asks for help and views neediness as weakness. On the surface, she might be drawn to strong, self-sufficient partners, but beneath that, her repressed vulnerability often attracts men who are excessively clingy or emotionally demanding. At first, she might judge them, rolling her eyes at their neediness, but their behavior triggers her precisely because it mirrors her own disowned dependency. The more she resists acknowledging her own softness, the more she'll encounter partners who force her to confront it. This is the shadow's relentless honesty. It will keep bringing you the same lesson in different forms until you finally stop running and turn to face what's been hidden. The painful irony is that the very traits we reject in others are often the ones we most need to reclaim within ourselves. The man who feels suffocating might be showing you where you've neglected your own need for connection. The partner who explodes in anger could be revealing the rage you've bottled up for years. The emotionally unavailable lover might be highlighting the ways you, too, have walled off your heart. This isn't about blaming yourself for toxic relationships. It's about recognizing that the patterns aren't random. They're invitations, however harsh, to dig deeper, to uncover the parts of yourself you've exiled, and to finally bring them home. Because until you do, you'll keep meeting the same men, wearing different faces, delivering the same message. Look within. What you resist persists. The first and most crucial step in shadow work is self-reflection, a deep, honest excavation of your emotional triggers. The people who irritate, frustrate, or even obsess you are often mirrors of your own disowned traits. When you feel a strong negative reaction toward someone, pause and ask yourself, what is it about this person that bothers me so much? And where might this same energy live within me? Journaling is one of the most powerful tools for this. Try prompts like, what behaviors in others make me feel angry, ashamed, or uncomfortable? And, if I'm being completely honest, when have I acted in a similar way? You might resist this at first. Our egos are skilled at deflecting blame, but with practice, you'll start to see the patterns. The coworker you label as manipulative might reflect your own fear of speaking up directly. The friend who seems needy could be highlighting your own discomfort with intimacy. The goal isn't to condemn yourself, but to recognize that these judgments are clues, pointing you toward the parts of yourself waiting to be acknowledged. Once you've identified your projections, the next step is to own them fully. This is where most people get stuck, because it requires brutal honesty. It's easier to say, he's the problem, than to admit, I'm repelled by him because he embodies something I deny in myself. But this is where true transformation begins. The next time you feel triggered by someone, pause and ask, is this really about them, or is it about me? For example, if you're constantly attracting partners who accuse you of being cold, could there be truth in that? If you're always drawn to people who end up controlling, where have you given away your power in subtle ways? Owning your projections doesn't mean excusing bad behavior in others. It means reclaiming the parts of yourself you've handed over to them. When you stop seeing these traits as out there and recognize them as in here, you take back control. The third and most liberating step is embracing and integrating these disowned aspects. This is where shadow work moves from intellectual understanding to real healing. If you've spent a lifetime suppressing your anger, practice expressing it in healthy ways, setting boundaries, speaking up when you're uncomfortable. If you've judged neediness in others, explore where you, too, crave reassurance but have been too proud to ask. This isn't about becoming someone else. It's about reclaiming the full spectrum of who you already are. A powerful exercise is to write a letter from your shadow. Let it speak in its raw, unfiltered voice. What has it been trying to tell you? What does it need you to acknowledge? You might discover that the traits you've been running from, your sensitivity, your ambition, your desire for love, are actually your greatest strengths once you stop resisting them. Finally, set firm boundaries, not just with others, but with your own patterns. Shadow work isn't about endlessly dissecting your psyche, it's about changing your behavior. If you've realized you attract emotionally unavailable partners because you, too, fear intimacy, then the solution isn't just awareness, it's action. Start catching yourself when you're drawn to someone who feels familiar but unhealthy. Interrupt the cycle by choosing differently, even if it feels uncomfortable at first. Boundaries also mean walking away from relationships that reinforce your old wounds. You can have compassion for someone's struggles without allowing them to reenact your past. Each time you choose a healthier dynamic, you weaken the shadow's grip and rewrite your subconscious love map. Shadow work isn't a one-time fix. It's a lifelong practice of self-awareness and courage. But as you do it, something remarkable happens. The wrong men stop appearing in your life, not because the universe magically changed, but because you did. You no longer send out the invisible signals that called them in. The projections fade, the compulsions lose their power, and what once felt like fate becomes a choice. And in that space, real love, the kind that reflects your wholeness, not your wounds, finally has room to grow. One of the most transformative habits you can cultivate is the conscious pause before entering a new relationship. When you meet someone who sparks your interest, instead of immediately getting swept up in the excitement, take a step back. Use this time to check in with yourself. Does this person feel genuinely healthy for me? Or am I being drawn in by an old, familiar dynamic? So often, we rush into relationships hoping they'll fill a void or heal old wounds, only to realize too late that we've repeated the same mistakes. Shadow work requires space, time to reflect on whether this connection aligns with who you're becoming, not just who you've been. If you notice an intense, almost compulsive pull toward someone, that's often a red flag signaling an unconscious pattern at play. The healthiest relationships don't begin with urgency, they grow from clarity. By slowing down, you give yourself the opportunity to choose differently, breaking the cycle before it begins. Another powerful practice is pattern recognition. Most of us have a vague sense that our past relationships share similarities, but without concrete examination, those patterns remain invisible forces controlling our love lives. Take out a journal and list your previous partners. Not just their names, but their behaviors, the issues that arose, and how the relationships ended. Look for recurring themes. Did they all struggle with commitment? Were they emotionally hot and cold? Did they subtly undermine your confidence? Underline the red flags you ignored or excused at the time. This isn't about self-blame, but about shining a light on the subconscious criteria you've been using to select partners. Once you see the blueprint clearly, you can start to question it. Why have I accepted this behavior in the past? What part of me believed this was what I deserved? The more specific you are about your patterns, the easier it becomes to spot and stop them in the future. Alongside these practical steps, rewriting your internal narrative is essential. The beliefs you hold about love and your worthiness of it operate like silent commands, shaping who you attract. If you unconsciously think, "I'm not enough," or "love has to be earned," you'll inevitably find partners who reflect those beliefs back to you. This is where affirmations become more than just positive thinking, they're a way to reprogram your subconscious. Start with simple, present-tense statements like, "I attract partners who respect and value me," or "I am worthy of a love that feels safe and nourishing." At first, they might feel untrue, but repetition is key. Say them daily, write them down, and, most importantly, act as if they're already real. When you start embodying the belief that you deserve better, you'll naturally become less tolerant of behavior that contradicts it. Over time, your outer world will shift to match your inner shift. True change happens when awareness turns into action. It's not enough to know your patterns. You have to make different choices in real time. The next time you feel drawn to someone who fits your old, unhealthy type, ask yourself, am I choosing from fear or from growth? If the answer is fear, fear of being alone, fear of not being loved, fear of rejection, that's your signal to pause. Healing isn't about perfection, it's about progress. Some days you'll slip back into old habits, and that's okay. What matters is that you keep coming back to your commitment to yourself. Every time you choose self-respect over familiar pain, you weaken the shadow's hold and strengthen your capacity for healthier love. The journey from attracting the wrong partners to cultivating nourishing relationships isn't about fixing yourself, it's about returning to yourself. It's about recognizing that the love you've been seeking externally was always meant to be found within first. When you do the work to heal your shadows, affirm your worth, and break old cycles, you don't just change your love life, you change your life. And the right partners? They'll appear not because you chased them, but because you finally became the kind of person who no longer settles for anything less. The men you attract are not random, they are messengers, revealing the unhealed parts of yourself waiting to be acknowledged. Your shadow is not your enemy. It is the map that leads you out of repetitive heartbreak and into relationships that honor your wholeness. Every toxic pattern, every frustrating dynamic, every wrong man who showed up in your life was an invitation, sometimes a painful one, to look within and reclaim the power you've been giving away. When you stop blaming fate or bad luck and start seeing these patterns as reflections of your inner world, everything changes. You are no longer at the mercy of unconscious forces. You become the author of your love story. So where do you begin? Start small, but start today. Grab a journal and ask yourself, what's one shadow trait I've been avoiding? Is it your neediness? Your anger? Your fear of being truly seen? Write it down without judgment. This simple act of acknowledgement is the first step toward breaking the cycle. Shadow work isn't about overnight transformation. It's about daily curiosity, the willingness to meet yourself with honesty and compassion. Each time you uncover a hidden part of yourself, you loosen its grip on your relationships. Over time, you'll notice the shifts. The men who once seemed irresistible now feel unappealing. The old dramas lose their pull, and what once felt like love begins to feel like peace. Now, I'd love to hear from you, because this work is deeper when we do it together. Have you noticed a pattern in who you attract? What shadow traits do you suspect might be at play? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might be the mirror someone else needs to see their own truth. Remember, the goal isn't to be perfect, it's to be aware. And every step you take toward understanding your shadow is a step toward a love that doesn't just feel exciting, but feels like home, the kind of love you've always deserved, but first had to find within yourself.